Are you looking for hope? You've come to the right place. Welcome to Seeds of Hope with Del and Penny. Encouragement for what you face today, tomorrow, and always. And now, here are your hosts, Penny Cook and Del Bates.
Hello and welcome to Seeds of Hope with Del and Penny. I am Penny Cook and my co-host is Del Bates. Hello, Del.
Good morning. Morning, Penny.
We are here to give you encouragement for what you face today, tomorrow, and always. And we're here live on Vero's Voice magazine on Wednesdays at 12:12 Eastern Time. After that, you can find us on your favorite podcast platform. So we want to welcome some very special guests this morning, right, Del?
Yes, we do. We have Eva Marie Everson and Miriam Feinberg, Vamosh. We're trying Vamosh. Okay. And Eva, I've been longtime friends with Eva. And she is a multiple award-winning author, speaker, and the CEO of Word Weavers International. She's the director of the Florida Christian Writers Conference. She is a graduate of the TESMA Institute.
Zamach.
How do you say it?
Zamach.
Okay.
It's Hebrew for the branch, right, Miriam? That's the branch. Is that right?
It's the branch,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm learning Hebrew this morning, everyone. She also has a degree in biblical studies from Andersonville Seminary, and Eva and her husband make their home in Central Florida. So welcome, Eva.
Thank you.
And then we have Miriam, and Miriam lives in Israel. She is a renowned author and a translator with a passion for the Bible, her land, her people, and her heritage. She is an expert in the field of archaeology and heritage. And Miriam also is a beloved, we're going to probably hear this as a story, but you are a beloved tour educator across the Holy Land. She was a longtime member and translator team at her Israeli daily Ha'atz. You say it. Okay. So we welcome you, Miriam and Eva, and we are excited to hear the backstory of the wonderful.
Thank you so
novel.
much, Del, for that
There it
introduction.
is. Ahati, right?
Ahoti.
Ahoti. Okay, they're going to share where the name came from and the background and the story for this wonderful novel.
Take it away.
Eva, why don't you start with how we met? What do you think about that story?
Yeah, so I was asked to go to Israel by the Israeli Ministry of Tourism for a 10-day tour as a journalist. There would be 5 other female journalists with me, and this was back in 1992. No, this was not in 1992. This was back in 2001 that I got the invitation. Yeah. I initially said no because I had been in New York City on 9/11, and I just didn't think I could put my mother through that again of me being somewhere that she might deem as not safe. But my husband encouraged me to go. And so I said, yeah, I'm going to go. And so Miriam was our guide, our interpreter, such a wonderful guide, but she sent an email ahead of time to introduce herself. And I remember sitting in my home office reading this email and thinking, I think I could really be friends with this woman. And so we had this wonderful moment in Israel where everything just kind of came together. And I just kind of casually said to Miriam, we should write a book together. And a few years later, we did. We wrote a book called Reflections of God's Holy Land, a personal journey through Israel together. I flew back to Israel, and Miriam and I spent about 10, 12 days together, just journeying through the land as a Christian woman and a Jewish woman, but also as just observers and pilgrims in this beautiful land of the Bible. And that book came out in '08 with Thomas
Mhm.
Nelson, won quite a few awards, very proud of that
Beautiful.
book.
Mm.
And then not too long ago, about 4 years ago, Miriam came to me with this project and said, hey, can you help me out a little bit on this? So I'll let Miriam tell it from there, and that gets into the
And
background of Mama T.
I love to trace back, just sometimes in my quiet time, I trace back how I met this person and what led to what. And if we ever do that in our lives, it's just amazing, these ties that are formed. And this is another amazing story to my mind. I was researching a book in my series of nonfiction daily life books in Bible days about children in the Bible. And I got as my scientific advisor, my content advisor, a man who's an expert in children in the Bible as well as many other things. He's a professor here in Israel. His name is Professor Meir Bar-Ilan. And when we had the launch dinner for that project, the children's book, which he worked with me closely on and corrected everything and added things and was wonderful and personable, warm and helpful. And he leaned over to me and said, I have a book that I wrote, a story in that book. I think that you're the one to tell as a
Wow.
novel. And it turned out that Professor Bar-Ilan is an expert on a manuscript called The Words of Gad the Seer. And in fact, that's a name or a name of a manuscript that appears in the Bible, in the Book of Chronicles, but like many of the other books of that type that are mentioned in passing, we don't know if it was lost or what happened to it or whether it really did exist, or we just don't know. It turns out that the book of, or the words of Gad the Seer was an actual manuscript that was discovered in the early 1800s. It was copied in Cochin, India, by the Jewish community of Cochin, and or brought to Cochin, perhaps from the Jews of Yemen, who were exiles from the time of the First Temple. And it made its way to Cochin, India, where in the early 19th century, the Scottish clergyman, the head of the Anglican Church in India, who was fascinated. That was the time of the beginning of the Christian Roots movement and the beginning of the fascination with the Jewish faith and the Bible, the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures. And he went down to Cochin to explore the Jewish roots of the Jews of Cochin, India. And there, this clergyman, Claudius Buchanan, came across the manuscript. And eventually he was so enthralled by it and taken by it that eventually he was able to take it back with him to England. And in the early 19th century, it found its way to Cambridge University Library. In the late 19th century, it was first publicized by a scholar, a renowned scholar, but not a lot of other than scholarly information or publications. Nothing much came out until Professor Bar-Ilan started working on it in the 1980s. The book is the manuscript, The Words of Gad the Seer, are a series of Bible stories that in Jewish tradition, as we've done since the days of the Talmud, the author, let's say Gad the Seer, took stories of the Bible and then wrote, what if?
Oh,
Exactly. What if?
yeah.
And so instead of, or in addition to, not instead of, but the biblical story, which says that Tamar, or Tamar, as she's called in English, that's the gist of the story, begins, or is the story of Tamar's rape by her half-brother Amnon.
Yeah.
And her brother Absalom's reaction, and how in the end, David's reaction, how in the end Absalom says, don't tell anybody that this happened. Just come and stay in my house. And that's the end of the story in the Bible.
Right.
But Gad the Seer asks, what if?
What if?
And takes Tamar, as Professor Bar-Ilan introduced the story to me, takes Tamar all through a whole series of events until the writer of this manuscript finds her solace, justice, forgiveness, acceptance, and a new life.
Woo.
And
Story of redemption.
and yes, and redemption. And when I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write it. But first thing, because I knew that Eva she's a writing coach as well. So I asked her, well, Eva Marie, how should I do this? Where should I start? And one thing led to another. And not only did Eva coach me, she became my co-author. She had so many good ideas and such knowledge.
We had fun.
Yes, and my job was to cover the 15 or 20 years after Tamar left Jerusalem until she ended up where she ended up and achieved all of the things that I mentioned before. And Eva helped me build that story, put life into the characters, and I'm so grateful for this partnership with Eva, which is it's the most special partnership other than with my husband that I've ever had in my life. And I can say that.
That means a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And it does come to life. The descriptions just put you right there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's something Miriam knows very well.
Right.
I was able to do.
Yeah. Yes. I was just going to say I was able to do that because I traveled the land so much that everything popped up in my head, which is what I tell people about a biblical a pilgrimage, that the words will just jump off the paper at you after you've seen the land. Go ahead, Eva. I cut you off there.
Oh, no. That's what I was going to say. I just was going to say that you know the land so well. You know the traditions so well, obviously. And I just think that what we did when we were working on it together was that we not only laid out the things that Professor Bar-Ilan had brought to Miriam, the ideas that Miriam had, but then we also opened up the scriptures and started dissecting it like line by line. So for example, the first thing that Absalom says to Tamar when he sees her after the rape is, why are you crying? Has your brother Amnon been with you? And I said, Miriam, out of all the men in the palace, why did he zero in on Amnon? What would make him do that unless he was a party to this? How did he know this?
Yeah.
And the thing is we read that one chapter and think, oh, what a great guy Absalom was. We forget all the other things that he did.
Yeah.
I mean, right down to raping his father's concubines, trying to kill his own father, killing his brother, which, we can look at it and say, oh, well, wasn't that an act of justice? But no, Absalom had another idea in mind, and that was the crown on top of his pretty little head. Yeah.
Wow. Well,
So-
go ahead.
It's all right. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Penny.
I was just I loved a couple of the quotes from what others have said who endorsed the book. And Jerry B. Jenkins says that you two were the perfect team for the amount of research that goes into a story like this. And then
I think because we both love it.
Pardon me?
Yeah. I think because we both love it so much. We love the land, we love the stories, we love the history, we love the Bible. So it's just that mutual love and admiration for all of that. But go ahead, you were talking about Tosca.
Tosca says it's evocative, illuminating, beautiful, tragic, and triumphant all at once.
Yes.
Yes.
I loved that because who doesn't want to read a book like that?
Right. Well, and I mean, the sad thing about it is that the Bible leaves her in such dire straits.
Right.
And this story, not only, the story of Gad the seer, but then Ahuti, it says, no, there is life beyond tragedy. There is hope beyond tragedy. And we just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. There's not a single one of us that will get through this life without some kind of tragic thing happening. It happens to all of us. But we don't mire down in that tragedy. We have to go beyond it. And so what we see in Ahuti is Tamar grows up. It could have been called that. Tamar grows up.
It's like
and finds that redemption.
yeah, it's like where the one line of the Bible ends with what it says about her is where your story begins. And that's where it takes you from there all the way through. And I just have to say the scene, the scene that really got me, and I kept reading that over, was when after it happened and she went into by David in the beginning, her father. Oh my gosh. I mean, that scene just, and just the way you even described her walking and how she felt and what she was going through is like you could just visualize it. And you just had such empathy for her. But your words, your descriptions brought you her feelings. I mean, you literally you could feel what she was feeling. And I
And
can't.
what she was
yes.
thinking.
And that came to us and well, in fact, one aspect of the book and our work together has blossomed and grown more than I would have even imagined, even though from the very beginning I decided to dedicate the book to my late sister, Lucy, who was a social activist and helped women in all kinds of situations. She devoted her life to that. So I dedicated the book to her, realizing that this is a story about a woman who faced a sexual assault.
Yeah.
And it was in my mind, it was in our minds.
Right.
But lo and behold, Eva, what have you been saying people have been writing you about?
Yeah.
Women have been writing you.
This has been the most shocking thing for me is I've been getting emails from people I don't even know and messages through Facebook, etc., saying to me, I was raped. I've gone through years of therapy, but nothing has healed me like this book. And I think it is that one foot in front of the other, knowing that God's purpose for your life was not that moment. That moment was stolen from you, but that does not mean you have to die in that moment. You can keep going. And just like the story of Joseph, Joseph could have stayed in that pit metaphorically the rest of his life, or he could have stayed in that prison the rest of his life, but he knew that there was a purpose beyond whatever tragedy befell him. So, and I bring up Joseph because, there was that moment when Tamar is given that beautiful
the
tapestry
robe.
robe. And she's thinking back on that with Joseph. Right. Well, that didn't bode real well for Joseph, and it might not bode very well for me either. And of course, we do know that she wore a beautiful robe. That part is in scripture. And so, yeah, that kind of stuck with me when I saw it, that, she would, and then hearing the story of Dinah, as we say, that would have, she's, okay, how do I say this correctly? You're not the only one, sister. There are other sisters there too. And you have a commonality that can make you strong or can destroy you. Which do you want it to be? Right. And I say, let's go for strength. Let's go for redemption. Let's go for hope. Yeah.
And that comes out in the book. It just, you see that in the book, how chapter by chapter, she's getting better,
literally,
getting
as Eva Marie said a couple of times, used the metaphor of putting one foot in front of the other. And that's what we had Tamar do, literally, as she traveled towards her geographical new destination and destiny. Oh, that's a good one. We have to.
I like that. Write that down.
And so one of the other things that the scholars, a lot of my research was delving into some of the Hebrew scholarship, the Israeli scholarship about Tamar and the royal court, and that robe that Eva mentioned, the fact that she was given that beautiful robe. Scholars have suggested, and one other tiny little thing that we made into a big deal in the book, tiny in quotes, that Tamar was actually a healer. the
Right. I
court.
love that. Yeah.
And that came from a scholar who said that robe indicated that she had a special standing.
Wow.
And one more thing is that the scholars tell us that David said, Amnon is sick, and you need to make him, there's different translations, cakes, bread, pancakes.
Mhm.
The
Meat,
word in
yeah.
Hebrew-
Yeah.
what else, Eva?
There's one that says meat.
Oh,
But at any rate,
okay.
it's why
Okay.
bring Tamar into this?
Well,
why
the
bring
word is the
Yeah.
word for what she prepared in Hebrew is very ambiguous. It's biria,
Mm.
which if you ask any Hebrew speaker today, what does that mean? They'll say, I have no idea. But in that word is the Hebrew root for health.
Oh,
So
wow.
the scholars say that she may have been preparing something that as a healer, she knew how to make.
Mm.
And I said, okay, I love that. So I made her into a healer and I brought all the spices in and the also Eva and I were talking before about empathy, empath,
Uh-huh.
that she used the healing techniques that were used for thousands of years before we had antibiotics and surgery and so
Right.
forth.
Mhm.
And the laying on of hands, which,
Mm.
as we know very well from the New Testament, talk therapy, which we would say today. And she became a healer, and the healer was healed.
Mm. Oh, I love that. The
Beautiful,
healer
beautiful.
was healed. Wow.
Oh,
But isn't it, I go back to what Eva was saying about the emails that people have written you. I always go back to that. What does God say? It's not your ability, it's your availability. You guys made yourself available to do this, but who knows how God's going to use this down the road? I mean, in healing people you may never know, you may never come in contact with,
No.
but yet God's
that
using it,
I was thinking about that a minute ago when Miriam was giving you the history of the words of Gad the seer, that when it was being translated in Cochin, India, and when this Scottish evangelical missionary went down there and they gave him this document, and when he took it back to Cambridge, and when it was studied, and then it was studied again, that through all of that, and if it did come from Yemen, and if it did come out of the exile, and if it did come from Gad the seer, the advisor to David,
right.
who is mentioned in the scriptures, that they had no idea
What would
that
happen?
in the year 2018, that two women would come together and start looking at this,
That's
and
right.
say,
Well, he
oh,
got
what if? Now we're doing the what if.
Yeah.
Gad was
Yeah.
a seer,
Yeah.
so he saw.
Yeah.
He was a seer.
Woo. You
Yeah.
guys give me chills. Like, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe there's a law scripture out there somewhere that says, and the Gad the seer saw two women
Yeah.
poring over the words with a funny little box in front of
Yeah.
them.
yeah.
You know the song that's out, God is in the story. I just keep hearing
Yeah.
God is in the, who sings that? God is in the story. And I just
Yeah.
keep hearing that song play in my head. God is
And he
in the
is.
story.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
is.
Because I think that is what we see all through it is, again, again, I'm going to go back to Joseph. Joseph was taken out of his homeland of Israel. So he left Israel. He was in Egypt. He was in jail. He was in Potiphar's house. He was, and so on and so forth. But God never left Joseph, you see. And so God never left Tamar, and God never leaves us. We may feel a separation because of our circumstances, but he's there. We just have to turn around and look for him and look for his footsteps within our story, as you just said. And I was just thinking back to when Miriam and I were working on the first book, the Reflections book. She took me down into the desert. And of course, the desert has so many metaphorical, connections to it. But we were walking in between these very large canyon walls, and they were wide, but they got more and more and more narrow between us. And I was watching her feet. as I was walking because she knew where she was going and I did not. And so, and that's actually how that book starts and I was thirsty. And so that was how I started it. I am thirsty, but I am watching the feet of the one walking in front of me. And of course, that was metaphorical as well. And so in Tamar's case, there is that moment where she is with, and I always have such fun with his name, Arid Avasadi. Is that right? That's not right. I just took two names and put them together. What is his name that she's following?
The Canaanite man?
Yes. Yes. Now I've heard it a million times and now I can't remember.
Yeah,
Isn't it
it's
Arid?
an A''A.
Yeah. So it's that.
I made it up.
Yeah,
I made it up, but I
Yasmin
can't
does a
remember.
great job with it. She does a wonderful job with it.
I made it up. I looked up what Canaanite names there were, what Northern Canaanite names there were, and I came up with that. But to tell you what it is now, I can't remember.
I can't even tell you. But she is that they're following him, and there are times when she is following Mara, but at some point it's just her.
Right.
And so that's those, those moments when you know that God has been with you all along, and now you better know it because it's just it's kind of like it's just you and him.
Right. So were there ever moments in when you were writing, did anything ever take your breath away that you found or you discovered or you wrote? Eva's saying yes already.
Yes.
And I think she knows mine.
Okay.
It was the moment when we were working on Tamar has learned that Absalom is dead and that he had raped his father's concubines.
Right.
And of course therein lies that sisterhood. And I put myself in her skin at that moment because what the Bible tells us is that David swore to take care. He swore to take care of the 10 concubines for the rest of their lives.
Whoa.
But he did not take care of his daughter.
Whew.
And that hurt me because I had such a wonderful relationship with my own father. Such a good man, such a good daddy. He was, till the day he died, he was daddy. He was not father, and he was daddy. And I just thought, man, if I ever thought that I could not depend on the loyalty and trust of my own father.
Yeah. Wow. Whew.
And he was more than that for her. He was not only her father, he was her king.
Right.
Beautiful.
And that probably hit me the hardest. And when I shared that with Miriam, she made such a sweet comment about it that, I just said, okay, she gets it too,
Wow.
And I think my moment was, I might call it more of a technical moment, because my forte had been nonfiction, and thinking up the plot lines was not something that necessarily came to me naturally. Although I must say, starting about 25 years ago, I started having the most amazing dreams that I thought something was wrong with me. I even went to a sleep clinic and I slept there all night, and they looked at my thing, and the doctor said, no, there's nothing wrong with you. This is just whatever it is. I said, well, if I can dream up plots like that, I don't even know if I ever told Eva this story.
No.
Maybe I can write fiction.
Wow.
But so the point that for me was a real turning point was when I was out walking my dog one night, and I'm thinking, how am I going to fill 15 years of her life? What am I going to do with her for 15 years until she gets to the other end, into the denouement? And it came to me, as Eva was saying earlier, that I could make her into the wise woman of Abel.
Oh, yes.
Which is another story entirely in the Bible. And we don't know who that wise woman was. But she could have been. And I called up the archaeologist who excavated at Abel, and I told her what I wanted to do. And she liked it. She thought it was possible. And then I shared it with Eva, and then Eva, you can say what you told us earlier before we were on the air, I think, what you realized, how that was even strengthened by something that you realized.
Well, yeah, in studying the wise woman of Abel, there's a moment when Joab, who is the head of David's army and his uncle, comes to Abel, and the wise woman of Abel is standing on the roof and looks down, and she calls him by name. And I said, now, wait a minute. How did she know that was Joab? And I said, so that puts it in the realm of possibility. Somehow, some way, this woman recognized Joab as the commander of David's army. So I found that to be very interesting.
Yes. So we put two and two together, and we did it as that is probably the epitome of, or a very good example anyway. There are so many of our teamwork.
Yeah.
And that Eva, when she was my coach, she would write in the margins, track changes. What about if you added something about this, something like this? And then she would like add a paragraph. And I said, well, can I just do that?
A paragraph.
She said, sure, go right ahead. So she is woven into the story in a marvelous way that otherwise just would not have been the same story.
It's like a beautiful quilt.
Yes.
You take a piece of fabric here and a piece of fabric there, and then you just bring it all together.
Yes.
And you don't see the backside of it, but you can see the front. And today, listeners are hearing the backside, but as they read the book, they will be able to see the beautiful tapestry of that quilt.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Gosh.
Yeah. Stitch by stitch, word by word.
Exactly.
We worked on it for a long time. I mean, people don't realize just how long it takes to write a novel. And I had kept up with, how many weeks we were working on it intermittently. And it turned out to be 40 weeks, which I thought was kind of funny. Having no idea that it was going to land the way it landed. We were so blessed. And if I can just share this story real quick.
Sure.
Initially, what I did was I went to Blythe Daniel, who is my agent, and I said, well, she wasn't at that time, she is now, but I said, Blythe, would you just look at this work? Miriam is in Israel, so it's not like she's over here working at conferences, trying to find an agent. And Blythe fell in love with it, signed Miriam. And initially it went to Endgame Press, Victoria Durstock, who we all know and love. And Victoria initially signed with Miriam and then said, you know what, I don't have anything to back this up. So she gave it back. Wow. And then Blythe took it, to various places, and it ended up with Paraclete. And Paraclete has just blown all of my expectations in the best way possible as far as a publishing house is concerned. And Miriam and I both feel so incredibly blessed that, number one, that Victoria listened when God said to her, you are not the publisher for this.
Wow.
And in fact, I saw Victoria, I haven't even told Miriam this. I saw Victoria a couple of weeks ago in North Carolina, and I gave her a gift, the Ahoti bag. And I said, Victoria, had it not been for you listening to God and doing what God told you to do, we would not have had the success that we are having right now. And I'm not saying anything against Endgame. And she said, oh no, I know that. I knew I didn't have the products to back it up, but Paraclete does. And Paraclete, they've just been beyond amazing. And I think that Ahoti found her home at Paraclete. I really do.
That's beautiful. Well,
and that's a lesson to anybody who's out there who's a writer, who, you think something's about to happen and then it doesn't.
Yeah.
Don't despair. God has a plan, and it's a better plan than you could have ever dreamed of.
You're speaking.
We can add that Ahoti means my sister.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was going to be my question.
Yeah.
Yes, it means my sister. And that idea, that's something that in the Hebrew language, we refer to each other. My brother, my older brother, if he calls me on the phone, he'll say, "Hello, sister," or "Hello,
Oh,
my
wow,
sister."
really?
And I'll say, "Hello, my brother." And it's not, you wouldn't
Mm.
necessarily do that. Although, Eva, I was thinking about the Southern tradition of calling the older sister
Brother.
sister.
Yeah. Right.
And,
And brother,
and
brother. Yeah, we do
yeah,
that.
brother,
Yeah.
brother. And my aunt was from Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky. She lived most of her life, and we called her sister. And I always
Mhm.
said, how come she doesn't have a name? Why do we always call her sister and Leo? Is her name sister? I remember asking that. But in our Hebrew tradition, we do that, and I
Whoa.
used it in the book a couple of times. That
Oh, right.
Absalom, refers to her Achoti, my sister, and Eva said she wants that. She would like that to be the name of the book. I said, but nobody's going to be able to pronounce it, Eva. Nobody's going to know what it even means. And Eva said, no, we love the put the
Yeah.
Hebrew in. And Eva was
Mhm.
always asking me to put more Hebrew in.
Wow.
Mhm.
So it went as far as very dramatic and exotic to be the name of the book, Ahuti, A Story of
Mhm.
Tamar.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I just thought it was perfect because not only is Amnon her brother,
Right.
a half brother, but her brother. Absalom is her brother. And then, of course, there is the moment with Solomon at the end, who is also her brother. And I just thought it was appropriate, but also because she is our sister. I
Right.
am
Wow.
Tamar. I am Ahoti.
Wow.
You know, we have all experienced, when you think about the fact that, you know, 1 out of 3 women universally will experience some type of sexual assault or rape. And probably every one of us have experienced some type of
Sure.
innuendo.
Tragedy.
Yeah, so, you know, something along the way. Definitely makes her our sister, and just as Dina became her sister, and
Mhm.
as the story goes on, we
Mm.
are not alone in this ever,
Right.
because we do have
Ever.
each other, but we also
Right.
have God,
Wow.
Amen.
who never intended for that thing to happen. You know, that was never in his plan.
Mm.
One of the things I am so strong about in my, not only in my faith, but in my testimony and my talk, is the most beautiful gift that God gave the bride and groom, Satan has used to destroy people.
Mm.
And it's a travesty, and it is a tragedy. But the enemy has definitely come in and taken something that is so beautiful and so intimate and so
Right.
personal,
Right.
and used it in such a horrific way. I mean, just about, you know, my husband and I love to watch crime dramas like 48 Hours, you know, that kind of thing,
Right.
where they're, you know, they're telling you, they're reenacting, and they're telling you this is what happened. And I guarantee you, at some point, some deviation of sex is going to be in there. You know,
Always.
somebody's had an
Yeah.
affair, somebody has done something
Yes.
crazy. And so once again, this was not what God intended for this beautiful young woman, but
Right.
oh, you know what he can do with our tragedies.
Yes.
Amen. And
Wow.
that is that the takeaway?
Yeah, I was just
Well, yeah, but there's one other thing I want to add. Miriam and I talked about this earlier today. Today is actually a very special day, not only for her faith, but for our faith as well. Miriam, you want to
Yes,
talk about that?
I
There's
mentioned
another
I mentioned to
Tamar.
Eva. Thank you for bringing it up, Eva, for reminding me what I told you this morning, that this is the eve of Shavuot, the Feast of
right.
Weeks,
Wait.
or Pentecost in the Christian
Pentecost.
faith.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And for all of us, both of our faiths, it's a very special time. In Judaism, in the Bible tradition, it ends the period from Passover to Pentecost, the 50
Oh, okay.
days.
50 weeks. Yeah, 50
Um,
days.
for
50
right,
weeks.
50 days,
No,
where
I said 50 weeks. Yeah, that would be
Oh,
a whole year, Eva.
I know I was going to say that, but I got it. 50 days. I got it this time. Uh, the weather is very unstable in the Holy Land.
mm,
And the farmers in the Holy Land are raising their barley at this time and some of their other fruit trees. And during that time, anything can happen with the weather. We don't have hurricanes, so I won't say anything can happen, or tornadoes, but you can have a terrific snowstorm. Forget that. A terrific rainstorm is what I wanted to say. Can knock the fruit off the tree, the little fruit things off the trees. It can knock the barley off the stalk. So that's a counting. We call it the counting of the omer. An omer is a sheaf of barley until the barley is ripe. And it's a time of stress. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to be? We count day by day. This is this day of the Omer, that day of the Omer. And just to get to the point, finally, I went off the point a little bit, is that during in synagogue on Pentecost morning, we read the book of Ruth.
Oh,
Because that's beautiful, that beautiful romantic pastoral tale is told against the backdrop of the barley harvest. And when we talk about that, because Ruth was in the field of Boaz, we remember, and then she met Boaz, and they had lunch together. They had a lunch date, and then they got. But how she got there was she was a stranger. Her mother-in-law. She and her and another woman had been married to the sons of Naomi. And Ruth decided after the sons died that she was going to go back with Naomi to Bethlehem. And a very famous thing that was said there, wherever you shall go, I shall go, your people, well, my people, your God will become my God. I always mention when we overlook the desert between the desert from Bethlehem, from Bethlehem towards the Dead Sea, that Ruth came across that area with her mother-in-law. And I loved my mother-in-law, loved her. And she was a wonderful mother-in-law, a wonderful grandmother, but I cannot imagine going through the desert with her. And so Ruth had that kind of strength. She knew what she wanted to happen. She put one foot in front of the other, once again, after the tragedy, one foot in front of the other, got herself to Bethlehem, married Boaz, and there was some begatting that went on there, and Eva always helps me with that. And eventually the scion of that family was David, who became King David, the ancestor of the Messiah in both our traditions. So that we have Ruth to thank for, and her fortitude, her determination.
And Miriam's mother-in-law's name was Tamar.
And my granddaughter's name is Tamar.
Oh, wow.
So yes, so there it all comes together.
All tied together.
All comes together. Wow. Well, this has just been wonderful. Just
Thank you.
I just pray that many will get this book and be encouraged and find healing through it.
And strengthened. Yes.
Yeah. And also, I talked to a friend of mine who is a Christian psychologist the other day, and I got some great information so that when people are emailing me now and saying, I've been through this, whatever, she said, here's who to refer them to, because like I said to Miriam, wow, I didn't see that coming. I should have seen that coming, but I didn't see that coming. So yes, there is hope and healing, but it is a fantastic story.
Well, we will put all the information for it in the comments, and just wish you all the success with it. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us.
Yes, and I encourage listeners, when you get the book, go to Amazon. Go and leave a review, because that is so important. And there are so many. I was reading the reviews last night. I'm like, oh my gosh, got to go to bed. But wonderful, wonderful reviews. And that means so much in the book. It really does, to the author to leave those reviews.
And the wonderful thing is you can cut and paste. So there's bookbub.com, there's walmart.com, christianbook.com. barnesandnoble.com. We never want to forget our good friends at Barnes and Noble, etc. So once I know everybody thinks Amazon is like, the god of
go to all of them.
Yes, pay homage. But they are all so important to us, and those reviews are critical to an author. They really are.
Well, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, thank you for being here. Come on
Yes.
back next week.
Have another great show next week, but
Yep.
thank you very much. All right.
And same here.
Have a wonderful week. God bless you.
Thank you. You